I'm going to try to summarize some of the results from the passenger experience side. In terms of challenges, the first that we have that I thought was quite interesting was the fact that we need to move from a system-centric view where every system is working in their own silos to a more passenger-centric view. So we need to consider how the passenger flows are moving over the flight and the train systems that we have right now, so we can have this multi-layer vision on how the passengers are actually using the services that we are providing. And of course, when we look into passenger experience, very importantly, we need to consider what are the passenger needs. And it was discussed that one of the key things is they need to have confidence in the system. And also, different passengers have different needs, and a very clear example that was brought forward is the difference between business or leisure passenger, which exemplifies how in one case maybe the total door-to-door mobility or ensuring that you have an arrival time before your very important meeting is more relevant, while in a leisure environment or context, you may be more willing to get longer buffers or waiting times or even delays because you can relax at the airport while waiting for your flight. It was also highlighted, which I thought it's a good reflection, the fact that there is changes on the passenger behaviors that we are seeing all around us, especially after COVID, and things that are very silly are things related, for example, with how we travel with regard to our luggage, how more and more we're having carry-on luggage, less check-in bags, and how that creates, in some cases, anxiety in the passengers because they want to make sure they can put their bag inside the plane so it's not going to get lost and things like that. And that's something that if we expand the view towards more multimodality and total passenger experience, should be taken into account. Richardo just said, let the market talk, right, to try to see how things work. And from the passenger experience, I think there was quite a lot of focus on make the regulations have a saying, so we can regulate the system, so we can give that confidence to the passengers. And that's one of the challenges and one of the needs that was identified. So how to extend the current protection that passengers have in terms of duty of care and compensation from single mode to multimodality in a useful and meaningful way. And that links with some of the things that was identified about, from a passenger perspective, having a single point of contact. If something goes wrong, who do I need to talk so that that can be resolved? Which links to the next point, which is related with liability. Who is going to pay and how I'm going to get compensated? One of the groups have the discussion or the idea about bringing the private market with, for example, insurance. So not only regulation, but also like the role of the market in that case, right? How much is worth missing a connection? And all that is tied up with the very important need of single ticketing, which should bring together this liability, these responsibilities, who take care of what, and things like that. Another challenge relates with data ownership, data sharing, and the need for a data authority with an oversight, so more regulation to ensure that data is used appropriately, and how there could be some trade-offs and tensions between data privacy, data sharing, and predictability that is offered for the passengers. It was discussed how people in general, we are very reluctant if we are asked about it, about sharing our data, but in real life we use apps and are doing this data sharing quite continuously. So there was the discussion about passenger companions apps and this type of system that could support this type of better experience for the passengers because the information is being shared. Even though the political situation nowadays, maybe it's bringing us closer to more privacy. Focusing on the airports, there was a discussion about the need to improve the processes at the airport overall and how AI and new systems can support that. Very importantly, how to pass the information about the status of the system to the passengers, because the passengers get a lot of anxiety, or we do, for the uncertainty mainly, right? So how can we reduce that uncertainty? And that can be reduced by sharing that data. And again, like the support of the future use of AI tools that can predict disruptions and delays and pass that information to the passenger at the right time. It's something to be taken into account. There was also some discussion about the difference when we bring the system to multimodality. We're bringing different systems with different cultures, and very crucially, the difference between closed and open system, where you have like a high-speed rail train or a long-distance train in some countries, or a flight ticket. It's nominative, and we do check-ins, so we know where you are. But if you are using buses or commuter trains, then you just buy a ticket, and then you are in the system. So that brought also the need to have some type of neutral planner that can provide information to the passenger about how to move. And again, I think it links with the very point at the very beginning about how do we bring together the two layers, right? Like how the system is moving and how the flow of passengers is moving on top of that. And some of that we cannot really control because we don't even know where the passengers are. In terms of disruptions, something that was a challenge, but also like an opportunity, is how to provide information to the passengers in a structured way about alternatives. So if they are going to be delayed, tell them beforehand what should they do to continue their journey. Because one of the things that is more anxiety-inducing is the fact of the risk of getting stranded. So try to mitigate that risk by providing alternatives to the passengers that they can sort of like pre-plan even before they leave their home. And the final 2 points, it's an interesting fact that there is a tension between the business needs and maybe the passenger experience that we are discussing here. Because the business needs are focusing on improving their revenues, right, and making more money. And we know that the quality of service has gone down in general across all sectors and also in our sector. So then if we have this worse service that is provided to the passenger, how that links with a better service for the passengers in a multimodal total journey. So there can be some tensions there that need to be considered. And if we focus on the providers, which links also with some of the things from Richardo, we have different modes that can be in competition, but also in collaboration, in particular the tensions between air and rail. And that was some discussion about the need to increase the air-rail collaboration and alliances as it's already happening, try to extend that, which will be, again, more linked to let the market talk, I guess. Then finally, in terms of indicators, the other group had a very good point that is like, why are we doing all this? So what's the point of doing this passenger experience and multimodality and discussion? And the outcome is that it's very difficult because we talk to try to make the system better, but what does it mean? And that depends a lot on the passenger experience, on the passenger characteristics, on why they are traveling, how they are doing their journey. So it's very linked to subjective parameters that are difficult to measure. In one of the groups, there was a very strong discussion about things related with surveying the passengers, getting the information out of them in a structured manner. Ideally, once they reach their final destination, which are focused on the total arrival delay and the total arrival experience rather than the little hiccups that they have through the journey, and how to maybe have more of a continuous exchange with the passengers to try to understand why they are rating a journey as positive or negative, because it's a multi-factor area. And then we need to understand as a community focusing on the systems, how we can translate that multifactorial aspects and subjective aspect into specific things that we can measure. And we can do it top-down, saying we are the experts, so this is what we're going to measure. Or we can try to get feedback from the passengers in terms of how do we build that list of indicators and how do we prioritize them to model them. There is also like I think an interesting trade-off between tactical management of the mobility through indicators, like for example, checking how many passengers miss the connections, again, as Richardo mentioned before, how many passengers get stranded, but also try to, or how much buffer, how much waiting times they are having, what is the status of the different processes. That was an interesting comment, the fact that we can measure every process independently, but we lose very quickly the visibility of this whole passenger. The security may be very fast, but that particular passenger took a long time. Then maybe the check-in was very slow, but that particular passenger was very fast. We lose like the individuality through monitoring the different systems. What does I have here? The focus again on arrival rather than on departure. The importance of waiting times, not all the waiting times are bad. Sometimes we like them for our own mental health because we want to know that we have some easiness, like we know that if things are delayed, we are still going to make our flight. And that brought a very interesting discussion that not all the waiting times are the same. They are not symmetrical. We are happy maybe to have some waiting times at the beginning of our journey because they are buffer for us. But at the end of the journey, once we have arrived to our destination, we just want to be able to leave the airport as quick as possible so we can reach our final destination. So where do we focus as a community and where we improve the system? Maybe it's something also to take into account that the experience, how passengers feel the delays or the waiting times are different depending on where those are happening through the process. And finally, the last point is if we look into how the system is behaving, then maybe we need to look into flow monitoring again. So linking back to the very first point, we have the flow of flights, the flow of trains, the flow of buses and other mobility systems, and on top of that we have the flow of passengers. So we need to find ways of monitoring how that flow is happening so that then we can then benchmark different days or being able to quantify if we are seeing the flow of passengers as expected and operating properly, or if there is some areas where things can be improved. And I think that pretty much sums it up, unless there is anything else that needs to be added. We're happy? Okay, so that's it. Thank you.